Good
Hey guys.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi Bob.
Good morning.
I put some stuff for today's agenda, but it's just like 2 items. I think we should go through
I added one as well.
Okay, cool. Very cool. I think we should go through the community outreach just to make sure we have something tomorrow, I guess, with the MTF and some other stuff, right? Oh, yeah. You added CNTT and ODIM. Okay.
Yeah, we need to talk about that one. Yeah.
I guess that's part of the outreach, but yeah, we can start with those because I don't see Anand anyhow. So we have 3 minutes in. Give it another minute, and then we can go. Okay. Do you want to start with the CNTT stuff then?
Oh, that will eat up. That will eat up as much time as we give it. Once you, so we can certainly do that.
So we have the community outreach as the first topic, and I think
we can get that out of the way pretty quick, and then we can get into technical discussion.
Okay. So let's. So I see the CNTT ODIM thing is a more of a technical.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Well, so do you want to look at the community outreach stuff then, Alex? I know tomorrow we have a.
Yes, let's do that.
DMTF call.
We do have a DMTF call tomorrow morning. So you and I will tag team that. Martin said he couldn't make it.
Oh, Martin couldn't make it. Okay.
Yes, so it's just you and me. And John already had sent out an invite to that meeting. At least I saw something. So
no, I haven't. But basically, they decided not to have a separate meeting. They would go ahead and use the existing Redfish forum meeting for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you mind forwarding that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And what time is that meeting?
8 o'clock.
Okay.
Pacific time.
Yeah.
8 a.m. Pacific. Yeah.
8 a.m.
Correct.
Pacific. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Alex. I thought I said I could make that.
Oh, you could or could not? I couldn't remember. Wait, no, I saw a message from you that said you couldn't. Maybe I misread it. I apologize.
Oh, it's good if you're there, Martin, if you can make it. So.
Yeah, if you can, that'll be great. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I was just thinking, I'm sure I said I could, but
I thought
you got me doubting myself here. John, what did I say?
I apologize. No, you're absolutely right. I don't know why I thought it said could not, but you know, that's what happens when I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. No, I did. Yeah, okay. All good.
So the only thing there is...
I didn't mean to exclude you in any way from this fun activity we're going to have tomorrow.
It's no problem at all.
The only thing I think we need to do there is just refresh, look at the how much time do we have, John? Is it 30 minutes? Or?
You have the entire, I'll assume 30 minutes is fine.
Okay.
They set up the meeting They just had set up the meeting, so you could probably take an hour. You probably don't have an hour.
Okay, well, so let's not limit ourselves unless there's no questions of discussion. But what I'm gonna try and do, guys, is get rid of all the slides that have to do with, pre-formation kind of stuff. I think if we just focus on where we are today and what we're doing, then I think it's just a much shorter conversation.
Yeah. Good.
So I'll try to.
I think some people are struggling with the password that is all of a sudden on Zoom now, and I mean, obviously, I think there is a new policy that we need to have passwords.
Yep.
Right. So that's why they need to create a new meeting just for this, because they can't send you the existing one, because then you would have to password for all of them. So
we got in. So did they change?
Yeah, I think whoever accepted that new meeting probably can just click on the link, but I see some people coming in asking for it, right? So.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so we'll refresh the community deck then, Alex, just removing some of the old stuff where we say we're going to form in June.
I don't think we need to talk about governance and all that. We have documents for that. People can read and understand what's going on.
All right. Well, good. Do you envision, John, that there will be some questions, or do you think we will have a productive discussion there? Or most people are aware of the project, I guess.
No.
Okay.
There are a few people, so I don't know if you're going to get many questions at all, because the context of the meeting is that they're representing themselves individually, and they have to watch their own IP issues.
Okay.
So they'll be asking about ODIM, but they will not be offering much.
Well, I don't think we're looking to, for any IP.
Could you clarify the IP?
Oh, yes. So in a meeting, if any disclosure is made by, let's say, an HP rep about HPIP, then he needs to hold that back, because then it becomes the purview of the DMTF IP. Right. So in a standards body, you disclose things into the standards body, and then the standards body can utilize it.
So all we may have to make sure is that all the information we present is completely public knowledge. And I think our slide deck already has a disclaimer in front that speaks to that. So I don't think
so I'm less worried about ODIM exposing its IP, because that's kind of understood. It's each individual attendee, each individual company's got to watch out, make sure he doesn't suggest that ODIM do something, and then ODIM does it, and the person who suggested it, his company had the IP for it, right? So you get tainted by the fact that people are making suggestions that you guys take on and implement because it was a good suggestion, and are unaware of the IP associated with it.
Holy crap! Should we bring our IP attorneys in to represent us?
No. Normally, no. That's why each individual person.
This is open source. Whatever we implement is not subject to any company. We're governed by a license.
Yeah, right, and that's why the caveat is given to the other attendees, that anything they expose here is it can and may be subsumed by ODIM, right? As part of the discussion, they should go watch the mouse. If you know something secret within your company, and you should not suggest that ODIM can implement it.
Yeah, I mean, like, who in their right mind would disclose corporate secrets?
Exactly why the caveat is always given, just to make sure everyone is in the right mindset when they have these presentations.
All right. So I think that's the one that's coming up this week. And then the next thing on tab is the CNCF Telecom Working Group, which will be October 5th at 8 a.m. So right now it's just me. I hope there'll be other people as well, because it's always good to have more than one person. So that's kind of what we've got.
Very good.
And
I will join that. Yep.
And then
So that was, okay, so it was CNCF, did you say?
The
Yeah.
it's the tug, right?
It's the telecom working group.
Yeah.
Telecom working groups, yeah, okay. And that was October 6th, yeah.
Yeah, all of that is on the community outreach page.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of going through that page and looking for things. So on the CNTT front, I think Walter proposed a working session on the 26th of September to kind of hammer out some of the basics between CNTT and ODIM. To that end, I told them that I would prepare a few slides, and I did, and I put them on our research and development page, or in, I've added them to the R&D space. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk through today.
Where did you stick the slides? On the wiki somewhere?
R&D, if you go to R&D, it'll be immediately obvious. It'll say CNTT ODIM alignment.
Yeah, see it. Thanks.
Okay.
When he said, excuse me, Alec, when he said the 26, did he mean 26?
Is the working session. The actual meeting is scheduled for 15th of October, I believe.
So that's just a preparation meeting, right?
Yes. Yeah, what I didn't want to do, the meeting on the 15th, just so you guys realize what's going on, that meeting is a public meeting as part of the LF forum. I forget.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah,
so anyone can come, right? And so trying to do alignment with 50 uninformed individuals in the room, my experience with doing that is that it fails miserably, right? Because you get completely derailed by a billion questions and people take this in 20 different directions. So I suggested that we actually have a good straw man that we can present and say, this is what we're thinking. Now, help us kind of hone this or sharpen this, as opposed to saying, let's think about how these two spaces would interoperate.
Yeah,
so
no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and that's why he scheduled the meeting, right? So
right. So the working session is our Friday, and his Saturday. The 26th is a Saturday.
I don't remember, to be honest, which date it was, but I think it's next week.
Oh, I see. Okay. But we do have, he did put a placeholder on the proposal site, because that has to be done by Friday.
Yes, he did put a proposal site. Again, with anything that Linux Foundation does, especially online, you can change it on the day of, and I've done that. So, yeah. So it's never a problem, but I think he already put something there.
I know he did. Yeah. I'm just gonna double check it here and just make sure it looks good enough to.
And then, so I think we'll publish the additional information here, and it's a Linux Foundation event. I think they don't charge for online events, so anybody can join from this team.
That's right. It's not. Yeah, it's not a paid.
Sorry, I was taking some notes here from and adding some links. But so when is the CNTT actual presentation?
Well, so it is it's the agenda has not been set. The proposals are up there. The event occurs on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of October. And we will be slotted in somewhere after the 25th, when they have captured all of the topic proposals.
Yeah, I think and I could be hallucinating again, like I did this morning with Martin, but I thought he said the 15th.
I don't think that's been decided, because I don't think the schedule is.
Oh, that's fine. So once we know, we'll add the information on the outreach page. The good news is that that's moving ahead finally. So we're getting things done.
Yeah.
And then directionally, everybody can look at the community outreach page. I don't want to spend too much time on this, I guess, but the next thing after that would be October 1st. Well, before that, actually, we should put this in order now that we know in what order they will happen. But the OCP Telco project, John had arranged that. And so I think Jose is working on slides for that. and we're gonna. Jonas and I will have a little, working session with him to make sure that we inject all the stuff we need to talk about to OCP, like the profiles.
So that's just a project meeting, though. It's not an event. But then we have the Tech Week, which is an event, I guess. Is it?
Yeah, that part I don't know. OCP Tech Week is happening November 9th through the 13th, and skipping November 11th because it's Veterans Day. This is kind of interesting. I think there's a session being proposed. I'm not sure what the state of that is.
Yeah, so submissions, so they decided on a hard close for submissions. So we missed the deadline, and so they're
I
not
think
opening
it
back.
was already put there, right?
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I think AMI did the submission on our behalf.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't know exactly what. I mean, it's like a couple of days there. We don't know exactly what date we will present, or it's up there somewhere, I guess you were saying.
Yeah, the event schedule should be out today. So let me take a check.
So I've just adjusted the page a little bit so that we bubble up a few things. There are a couple of other presentations under the OCP umbrella, one to Open RMC, the other one to Open Edge. Those have been scheduled now. We'll decide, who's going to do what there.
Well, actually, they haven't been scheduled, right? The decision was we get to October 1st and decide which ones you want to go to.
Well,
so.
According to this site, our site, it says October 13th, 1 p.m. Eastern time.
No, that's the next meetings. There's a next available meetings that we have an opportunity.
Okay, so what do we need to do to put ourselves on the agenda for those meetings?
You can contact them, or I can contact them. Just saying, I can just contact the chairs.
Yeah, can you add us to the agenda?
Yes.
All right, thank you. We've talked about the Tech Week, and then there's Open BMC. We need to still do that. That's still TBD. TBD. All right, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Good. So then going back, I guess also Anand couldn't make it in. I just texted him or sent him the full link of the Zoom meeting with the password included. So hopefully that will get him in.
Yeah, maybe we should send if you have that. I'm not sure where you found that link, but
it was an invitation that went out again. I don't know to whom though. I mean, we should probably send it out on TSC. I'm thinking.
Yeah, so I put the old link on the TSC. I'll go cut and paste the new one. That's easy enough.
Okay.
So
then, yeah, I guess we should basically start with the CNTT ODIM discussion then, Alex, because Anand I know Anand, just a brief update. I know he created a public branch now in the project for this Cupid message bus effort, and he has also run some tests. I don't know exactly if he has run it with ODIM yet, and that's what I was hoping he could update us on. But let's keep that one and jump into the next topic here. CNTT ODIM.
Yeah.
Quick note.
Yeah.
The Tech Week will be on the 12th. That's when telco. If you submitted a abstract in the telco, that's when the telco track is on the 12th.
All right. So can people see my page here?
Yep.
So what I did is, and this is again some very sort of some thoughts around the diagrams. So Thomas was kind enough to send us this diagram that you see on the screen. Let me see if I can make it bigger. And I just kind of pasted that in. And then we nominally kind of said, well, ODIM would probably be here. I don't know if anyone can see my little pointer moving, but
Yep.
you know, it would be in the bottom right. And that implies certain interfaces and whatnot. The trouble with any kind of Etsy NFV style sort of architecture is that it's based on reference points. And that implies, you know, kind of very specific protocols and data exchange. There was an effort underway at Etsy to change the architecture to be more SA5 compliant, right? More service centric. But I'm not sure how far that got. You know, it was proposed by Orange, and I'm not sure if that was accepted and work is underway or what's going on. But the reason I mention this is because if you look at this diagram, these are well-defined reference points between different boxes, right? And they imply certain interfaces with over certain transports and protocols and with certain data exchange that's happening. If you look at ODIM, ODIM is more of a service-centric kind of architecture, right? ODIM basically says we'll expose a set of interfaces that you can call upon to procure ODIM services, right? And that's what the DMTF spec in essence kind of produces. And so anybody can consume, I'm gonna scroll now. Let me see if I can, yeah, maybe I can do this. Yeah, well, I'll just kind of go through it, right? So what we have is you know ODIM, but then ODIM exposes REST APIs that you know are available to anybody, and they're out of band and they're asynchronous, and there's no limitation on who can actually access them. In fact, there's probably a set of use cases that would require you know lots of different things to access the single source of truth, not just any given one. And so when I looked at the Etsy diagram, I tried to kind of fit, and you know this is kind of like a simplified view of different kinds of consumers, different products in the orchestration space that could potentially consume this information for different reasons. And then, you know, I've kind of tried to expose a couple of things here. You know, there's basically a control interface, and there's this optional adapter that allows you to expose, you know, and or make visible or control the actual devices, right? And so now if we combine the two, I started kind of by putting in the ODIM piece, but then I realized that ODIM doesn't do the SDN stuff. So that has to fall out.
But I partially agree, partially disagree with
well,
you, Alex. I think you're going to the right place, but I mean, yeah.
Let me finish my thought, and then I knew you would have some comments, and that's great. So let me kind of explain the rationale for what I did, okay? Yep. And so I've also kind of highlighted some of the key services within ODIM, right? These are DMTF based services, Redfish based services, one for composition, one for aggregation. If we assume those, if we assume that ODIM doesn't export, you know, any kind of reference endpoints, there's probably some integration adapter that kind of needs to do some magic. And, you know, I'm not exactly sure, you know, what that would look like or how, you know, what this CNTT reference point for hardware status provisioning and fulfillment actually looks like, but there would have to be some translation, I'm sure. The other thing to note here is that ODIM already has an abstraction, a model for grouping things and pooling things, right? You know, that's what the aggregation service kind of enables. And so if there is a pooling model um, with some level of abstraction being done as part of CNTT, then there would have to be an interface between, nominally somehow between ODIM and that functionality inside CNTT that does the pooling, because ideally we would want to synchronize the views, so that you can potentially do hardware management on those groups.
But the notion of aggregation in Redfish allows that grouping knowledge to either be in the orchestrator and ODIM and the Redfish service never knows about it. It's only a temporary grouping which is created as part of the interface, or it could be a persistent group. So it allows this flexibility of who has final say on what the group is.
Yes, I agree. And so all I'm calling out here is that potentially there is this new thing in red called the aggregation API, or whatever you want to call it, that potentially would need to be also part of this picture. Now, what's also interesting is that, there is the actual interface for hardware resource management, and you have to be careful here because the dotted lines go to different boxes, right? But in general, there's that interface that goes to the native control interfaces. And the other thing I've added to this diagram is the acceleration resource on the far left over here. So we have the standard kind of hardware control interfaces that would plug into the ODIM, southbound API. There would be some adapters here. There would be another interface for modeling of pooling or synchronizing state if it's done outside of ODIM. And then it gets really interesting after that. Potentially, each one of the orchestration boxes above can access ODIM and may need to access ODIM, right? We've already seen the case with in the past with VMware where they wanted to be able to access this information. And why? Because composition is part of ODIM as well, right? So you can imagine that, something like vSphere may want to create a dynamically instantiate a cluster on demand.
Well, composition is not part of ODIM yet. We are hoping that will become.
Well, yeah, but I'm basically covering, the eventual state as opposed to, just what it's there today, because, that might lead us down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. So all I'm suggesting is that, we already kind of know that from the Kubernetes point of view, which is the box above, there would need to be some interactions with ODIM. And even from the VNF manager perspective, I think there are implementations of VNF managers out there that actually want to understand the resources and have the grant API, if I remember right, that allows them to grant resources to different VNFs. So that also has to be part of it, right? So what I'm basically trying to do here is represent the fact that the ODIM interfaces are available to all. It's kind of hard to do in this diagram because it follows the NFV kind of very structured architecture, but I think I kind of got the point across, right?
But I think that I would say you're 75% right of what you say here, but you're misinterpreting or a couple of different things in the picture as such, because we might have not have drawn it in exactly the type of view that you want to see.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm glad that you think that it's 75% right. I was actually aiming for like 51, but this is kind of, to me, a good starter conversation, right? Because for example, the stuff on the right here with all these little red dotted lines, how do we show an interface which is more of a service endpoint if we look at the 3GPP SA5 model, right?
But if I can explain that area where I think that what you're doing with this picture is that you are messing it up by drawing the dotted lines going all to ODIM, because you put ODIM sort of in the center and say, hey, we can get information or control from all these different places. And putting ODIM in the center, that's absolutely true. But the picture is there to show that from a CNTT perspective, we would like to have this double line where it says hardware status provisioning and fulfillment. We would like to have that standardized. And when we CNTT say we would like to have it standardized, is not the same as saying, okay, Etsy can point to it and say that it's a reference point and then be done with it. We want it standardized, and we want to be able to point, for instance, to say, this is Redfish northbound composition interfaces for the intent-based or help me out here now, John, constraint composition.
Sure.
Something like
Sure.
that.
Yes. So
and hear me out. So that that type of an interface, we want to have more standardized than a reference point.
mhm.
Some of those interface primitives we want to say should be made available for the SISM, the Container Infrastructure Service Manager, and for the Vim. So that, and specifically we've targeted the SDN area as being the three-letter word software-defined networking, not a particular implementation for the moment, but saying that when a Vim would like to do its overlay networking, which is often done by Neutron, then
Yeah.
it should have a interface that is well specified according to CNTT of how you talk to a hardware infrastructure manager that in itself, hopefully in there, will have a component that is doing network management of the underlay switching, which is what we call an SDNU in this picture.
So the O and
And the SDN, hang on, just hear me out.
Yeah.
The SDNU in this picture then would be sort of the source of truth of what intent this deployment should tell over the aggregation API in towards the switch fabric, which is what you talk about, the mediation, what ODIM talks about as being the mediation over to anybody's switch fabric that you need to have a data model in there.
Yeah.
So that clears out your first thing, that from the ODIM type of a thing, there needs to be some way of interacting with switch fabrics where you actually would have the complex management
Okay.
inside the box hardware resource pools, whilst on other places, like each and every individual server normally, you would probably go on the southbound, ODIM southbound API towards each and every compute server instance enclosure over a BMC or something like that to set up
Right.
a couple of different things. But you might also go over some sort of slightly more complex thing, how to set up an out-of-band managed SmartNIC or accelerator. So
Right.
yes, your horizontal lines are absolutely true, that both of they exist, absolutely. And
Okay.
so are the vertical lines as well. But the intent of the resource modeling here is to show that we would like to have standardized interfaces for the things going from the hardware infrastructure management to the Vim and the SISM, whilst the thing coming from a hardware infrastructure going up to the orchestrator, which we believe is probably a cloud infrastructure orchestrator that sits on a lower layer, or somebody that owns the cloud would have a cloud infrastructure orchestrator. And then you would have workload orchestration, which deals with VNF placement and so on and so forth, which is a different type of an orchestrator. They would
Yeah,
interact
Thomas, I
with
was
each other.
specifically, just kind of give you a little bit more clarity. I was specifically looking at ONAP as the model that would, as something that would get plugged into this diagram, right? And
But ONAP stops at the infrastructure layer, to my knowledge. So the cloud infrastructure orchestrator is an animal that I don't think exists in ONAP, to my knowledge yet.
So ONAP stops at the Vim layer today. There was a proposal on the table to actually extend ONAP to also interact with the physical infrastructure management layer, which is what ODIM is. And the reason for that was to start handling on-demand dynamic resource sharing, especially for the edge, right? And those use cases came, I think, from Verizon, Orange, and IBM or something like that. So the point was that in some cases, you want to be able to recompose resources based on different sets of constraints, depending on how you reallocate resources on the edge, right? During, peaks and valleys and other, policies that might be enforced.
And that's exactly what I'm calling cloud infrastructure management.
Right.
And if you can take two different stands on this. One of them is that,
yeah, but those decisions in ODIM are made by ODIM, not by something underneath, right? So
no, I don't agree that ODIM can take all decisions of cloud infrastructure management because it's simply acting on a
yeah, ODIM may simply issue an order that says, look, we're gonna deconstruct a resource and then reconstruct it, right? And for that, it doesn't need to go to, it doesn't, imply that it will go and say, I want this particular piece to be, these particular pieces to be used as part of the infrastructure for it. But abstractly, it could say, I want to craft an instance of something like a pod or an entire Kubernetes instance on the fly.
No, ODIM can't do that because ODIM should not know about a Kubernetes instance. It should only
ODIM shouldn't, but something inside ONAP could and would, right? Yep. And so the choreography around creation of a Kubernetes resource is something that could be plugged into ONAP, which is what we proposed, right?
Yeah. So but that would either be in this picture, it would either be a part of the box called orchestrator, yes, or it would be something that sits in the virtual infrastructure layer that, yes, takes into consideration, yes, both the system, yes, or Vim and the hardware infrastructure.
So let me then press on that a little bit. I agree with you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. So this is exactly the reason why I pointed the red lines all the way to the orchestrator and also to the two infrastructure managers, right? Because even within the confines of ODIM today, we've talked about integrations between Kubernetes and ODIM, right? But there may be other things there. For example, some crazy combination of Airship and Akraino could actually provide definitions and orchestration or choreography for how bare metal needs to be assembled, with fine-grained operations, being done over the ODIM interfaces, right? Not the whole thing. So, so how do we show that, right? The dotted line is probably not a good thing, right? Maybe a double line needs to be shown. No?
So a question for both of you here in a second here. So first, what is the service composition intent when we are talking about southbound that are just abstracting specific hardware here? What really does that look like? And well, let's start with that. What really are we talking about here with service composition or resource composition in the way you are describing it here?
Well, so if you look at the resource composition APIs, that's exactly what we mean, right? So those are part of the Redfish spec, and the idea was to implement them as part of ODIM. So from that perspective,
okay, it's that, okay.
Yes, so we're not talking about the client side of the composer. We've gotten a lot of feedback in the past, at least Intel had, that basically said, well, the actual client side of the composition service, the thing that initiates all these API calls, that could be embedded inside the Vim, that could be embedded inside the SISM, or it could be embedded in other places as well. It all just depends. For example, we did an extension to OpenStack where OpenStack Ironic was actually calling upon composition interfaces and redfish interfaces to create resources when needed, and then enroll them into the right, I forget what it's called, a group or whatever, and then make them available to the rest of OpenStack, right? And that was being done on demand.
Okay, no, thank you. That clarifies. Is that for a second I was afraid we were talking about everything there.
Oh God, no.
Okay.
So for example, Ansible, right? Ansible would sit on top of it all, and Ansible could be, kind of driving, what's happening, and then calling upon ODIM to do the little, the actual tasks of hardware configuration and reconfiguration and whatnot.
Yeah, I think also, yeah, but also I think it's important to, this picture is specifically drawn in a way so that even if ironics and those kind of things could do that,
yeah,
we are strongly advocating that that should not be the norm going forward for people building cloud infrastructures. And the main reason for that is that we're moving from a VM-based world into a world where we will have both VMs as well as multiple bare metal container systems side by side on the same, in this picture.
Sure.
And because of that, there is a need for some sort of an orchestration entity, and either in an own-up space or by itself in the cloud infrastructure layer, that is subdividing the hardware resources in between the different system and VIMs. Therefore, it ought not to be inside a particular ironics for a Vim instance.
So if you look at it, Thomas, I think you're right. I think if we apply, for example, a VMware picture here, just for giggles, the only reason I'm doing that is because I know it better than others. But the box here would be the SDDC, the software-defined data center layer, right? That does the pooling, does the abstraction of the hardware. Some of the hardware could be physical, some of the hardware could be, virtualized. We don't know, right? But or composed.
The SDDC is a specification. It's not a piece of code. It would be the hardware manager in the VMware terminology that would be part of it, and that would probably be on the right side. If it's completely, and so, then you would have vSphere as being the Vim, but you would have a vDirector or something like that up on the orchestration layer, or cloud, whatever that's called, Cloud Foundation.
Right. So so then going back to my original question, and I didn't really know what to do. So the dotted lines that you see here, should they be double lines from the?
No, I don't think so, because I think that what we just talked about in VMware is that those dotted lines, if you go to VMware and say, please build me a cloud infrastructure, please VMware, and this is my requirements on it, then the dotted lines will be VMware specific.
Well,
so you can't do that in that kind of a case.
Well, they would not be VMware specific because they would be calling upon ODIM APIs to do that.
No, VMware wouldn't use ODIM. Sorry.
Well,
you can hope all you like, but they wouldn't.
Interesting, because they built a demo that did that, but that's okay.
Yeah, and they've also, been using other proprietary solutions from different vendors.
Well, yes. So that may be an opinion, but I think the reality is that they do want to be able to orchestrate, composable resources and other things through something like ODIM.
So if you look at this at a higher scale, I think that's where Thomas is going. So you will have something like something to do site designs, and that's where you basically draw the relationship between how you want to distribute your infrastructure, how you want to connect it. And then whatever it's used as for infrastructure management or platform management or whatever, is invoked to deploy the corresponding component, being either hypervisor or containerized or whatever, into that location. But the one designing this is at much higher level, which I would agree is more on the orchestration level that you have all the way on to the top there. That's how you design 100,000 locations, for example.
Exactly, and then you cookie cut them, right?
But I think that fundamentally in this kind of a picture, when you talk about the interfaces, which this one really talks about, then to my understanding so far, ODIM does not create, standardized, or issue standards for interfaces. They are making a framework for implementation. So this is an example that could fulfill standardized interfaces.
Well, so DMTF does. That's what we've said from day one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, right? When I say ODIM interfaces, I presuppose that everyone understands what I'm saying. There's a DMTF Redfish spec we implemented, so the interfaces exposed by ODIM are in fact DMTF Redfish APIs. Okay.
I wouldn't think that everybody outside this discussion understands that fully. But
that is actually a very good point. Very good point.
This is why I built this diagram as an interim point, basically saying, look, Redfish Management Service APIs, Fish, Swordfish, whatever fish, resource management APIs. We can adjust these titles and names, but my attempt was to say, look, we start with this diagram. We then talk about ODIM in terms of how it's organized and what interfaces it exposes. And then, we get to kind of refactored kind of world. The honest truth is that in this diagram, there's nowhere that I can put a 3GPP SA5 lollipop indicating a service endpoint. And that's what DMTF standards in essence define for us from the implementation perspective. It's an endpoint you can call upon. We have an eventing endpoint. We have a composition endpoint. We have an aggregation endpoint. There's no way for me to put a lollipop in here and imply that anybody potentially, whatever, whoever wants to, it really doesn't matter to us. So anybody can call upon that lollipop to obtain a service from ODIM. That's it, right?
Not sure I understand the analogy with no lollipop. That might be an American thing, but
no. If you look at the spec, William, that's the model that they define in SA5 has a notion of service endpoints, and they're exposed through these. The way they construct them is they use lollipops for that, right? A circle with a line, a typical UML interface definition, right? So. All I'm doing is giving Thomas an example of what these dotted lines should have been. Okay.
By the way, the one that did talking, I think, is Thomas, not me.
Yeah, it was myself, Thomas. But it doesn't matter. I think that this picture, to me, is a good picture in the CNTT context when you come down definitely to what's called a reference implementation.
Right.
Because, in CNTT terminology, the reference model, they point out reference points, models, and interfaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give input to reference architectures. And the reference architectures today are defined, one for OpenStack and another for containers, Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go one step further and they say, let's build a reference implementation based on the reference architecture.
Yes.
And that reference implementation ought to deploy as much open source as there exists. And then they build reference configuration test suites to that reference implementation. And then the intent there is, if you pass so and so many of the conformance test suites, tests in the suite, then you can get a badge that you are CNTT compliant. And there I think ODIM fits very well into a reference implementation of the interfaces. And there ODIM would implement the DMTF Redfish interfaces where the reference model in CNTT has specified that there ought to be a certain set of Redfish northbound APIs being present to be possible to be implemented.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. That's fine. Can I ask another question, Thomas? From the CNTT perspective, do you guys have a strong opinion on how resource pooling is done?
Not sure I understand the question, but the in this picture, the word resource pool and abstraction model here sits in that box because the virtual machine managers and the container infrastructure service instance should be consuming abstracted compute, storage, and networking resources from something that is regarded to be a hardware resource pool. And with that said, they should not believe that what they got day zero when they booted up is the thing that they will live with forever. So think about the analogy we very often take in the discussions here is that you're actually renting your server. It happens to have a registration number, or UUID or whatever, of the thing that you currently got. But if there is a reset, you can actually get a different instance after that reset. But nobody will take that instance from you. Nobody would reset it or steal it from you whilst you're running with it.
Understood. It's the typical cloud, on demand kind of resourcing.
Yeah.
So then this box on the left side, if we were to put this in practical terms, that would be the hypervisor?
The virtual machine manager would be the hypervisor, yes.
No, the virtual machine manager might be something that manages the clusters. There's a hypervisor running on individual hosts that actually creates, divides those physical resources underneath it into, well, I see what you mean. Yeah, you're right. You're one level higher. So
yeah.
Then the box
so
on
if you view it as we have an example picture where we also have drawn in sort of the packet flow type of a thing in there.
I see now, because you have the VMM up above, okay? And so from that point of view, then the VMM could potentially also call upon ODIM to perform some hardware resets on the physical hardware, because it is the abstraction layer in essence.
Yes, yes.
So we have a confusion here. What is this aggregation API dotted line thing going between the ODIM red box into the hardware resource pool with abstraction model thing?
Well, the reason I put it there is because I felt that if there's going to be some hardware resource pool model here, somehow it would need to be synchronized with what we believe to be, potentially it would be useful to synchronize that model with how we think about aggregations of things.
I would think about the dotted line that you draw from the aggregation box into the hardware resource pool here. That probably need to be two different ones depending on what resource it is, because the intent, at least from the foundation in this picture, is that the only line that goes in there could be either to the physical resources, meaning that it goes to the BMC of a physical resource, which doesn't necessarily represent the abstracted model of that resource, but it's the management interface of a server BMC, for instance.
Do you see
another one? Sorry, but another thing that can go on a completely different line between the hardware infrastructure manager and the resource pool could be the interface to the switch fabric, which is a completely different type of an interface, and there you need to have a synchronization.
Well, or it could be yet something else if we start looking at the worlds of DPUs and XPUs and some of that stuff.
Sure.
So
I think
today, just for information, ODIM the RA doesn't assume that it knows stuff. It asks the end resource if that has a manager interface, what is your property and how they configured, and then it caches it. And if there's any reason to refresh that, it will be refreshed. So there is no need for any, weird new interface as it looks today. We can obviously discuss about the future.
yeah, I think the only reason I put it there is because I think as disaggregated hardware starts becoming more commonplace, I think we're going to need, the notion of resource pools is going to change a little bit, right? It's maybe a slightly different way of looking at things.
But you view this as some sort of a DMTF specified
well,
set
it
of
would have
APIs.
to specs if they want to be future-proof, they would need to somehow take that into account. I don't know. I'm happy to remove the line. I'm not going to, I don't have strong feelings there. I simply was calling out potential topics for discussion that need to occur.
Yeah.
And so all the stuff in red is subject to debate with, the CNTT side of the house.
Yeah. So we have 3 minutes left, or 2.5, and I just wanted to also mention that we have a white paper that we want to send out on the networking and fabric side of things, and it's more about the DMTF resources, but it also ties into ODIM, and Martin has done most of the job there, and that is something we want to take through TSC. How do we go about that? Should we just send it out on the TSC mailing list, and then we can queue it up for some discussions?
Yeah, I mean, we can do it simply. We can use a process like send it out, give people a deadline to review it by and comment by. You can anchor that paper on the wiki page so people can comment right, in the comments section there, so we can record the comments. And then if there are no comments by a certain date, then the default disposition will be to approve the document.
And then we will, because LF has already agreed to create an LF template around it, but they want it to be approved first. So.
Okay, so we can do that. I mean, and if there are no comments, then there's nothing to discuss. If there are comments that require discussion, we'll have a discussion section.
Okay, and then do you think that 2 weeks or 1 week, or what will be that time? Sorry?
How big is the paper?
Martin, do you remember? 15
roughly
pages?
8 pages.
How many?
Roughly 8.
Oh.
This was Thomas, though. Martin maybe was here, so he can also use something.
Yeah, I am, but he's still on mute. So.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so roughly 8. Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, good.
I read it.
Not a big
so
paper. Perhaps a week is enough, do you think?
Yeah, a week is probably enough, I suppose, to read 8 pages.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
It's not
Sorry.
that complicated, right? So.
Yeah.
Guys,
all
I
right.
think we're out of time.
So then just to circle back to this really quick, Thomas, if you have any particular advice or thoughts or opinions, whatever, on additional lines or removal of things or whatever, then you're most welcome to change this as well, obviously. The other thing I was going to say is that I'll also create a list of discussion topics and put them here so that when we go into that working group session on 26 or whatever it is, then we'll have that's it.
Very good.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Bye.